Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Shirley Thomas, Professor, Department of Economics, Avanachalingam Institute for Home Science and Higher Education for Women, Coimbatore. Today we will discuss something on protection against violence on women. To start with, violence against women is the most subtle form of human right violation, denying women equality, security, dignity, self-esteem, and the right to enjoy fundamental freedom. Though most societies prescribe violence against women, the reality is that violations against women's freedom are sanctioned under the guise of cultural practices and or through misrepresentation of religious tenets. Moreover, when violence takes place within the confines of home, the abuse is condoned by the tacit silence displayed by the state and the law enforcing authorities. The most prevalent form of violence, or yet the most ignored form of violence against women, are domestic violence. While reliable statistics are hard to come by, studies estimate that between 20 to 50% of the women experience violence in the hands of intimate partners or from the family members. Domestic violence can take a number of forms, including physical, verbal, emotional, economic, religious, and sexual abuse. And this can range from subtle to coercive forms to marital rape and to violent physical abuse such as female genital mutilation and acid throwing that result in disfigurement or death. There is a growing recognition that countries cannot reach their full potential as long as women's potential to fully participate in the society is denied. The true indicator of a country's commitment to gender equality lies in its action to eliminate violence against women in all forms and in all areas of life. Now let's look into the learning outcome, or rather the major objectives behind this module. First one is understanding of violence and its various forms. Second, effects of violence, and the third one is develop understanding of awareness program aimed at eradicating violence against women. Now the first one, to start with, understanding violence and its various forms. Now there is no universally accepted definition of violence against women. The United Nations Declaration on Elimination of Violence Against Women defines violence against women as any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats such as acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. Accordingly, violence against women encompasses, but it is not limited to, the following: physical, sexual, and psychological violence occurring in the family, including battering, sexual abuse of female children in the household, dowry-related violence, marital rape, female genital mutilation, and other traditional practices harmful to women. Non-spousal violence and violence related to exploitation. The second one relates to physical, sexual, and psychological violence occurring within the general community, including rape, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and intimidation at work, in educational institutions and elsewhere, trafficking in women, and forced prostitution. The third type is physical and sexual and psychological violence perpetrated or condoned by the state wherever it occurs. Acts of violence against women also include forced sterilization and forced abortion, coercive, forced use of contraceptives, female infanticide, and prenatal sex selection. Domestic violence include violence perpetrated by intimate partners and other family members and manifested through various forms like physical abuse such as slapping, beating, arm twisting, stabbing, strangling, burning, choking, kicking, threats with an object or weapon, and murder. Sexual abuse such as coerced sex through threats, intimidation or physical force, forcing unwanted sexual acts or forcing sex with others. Then psychological abuse includes behavior that is intended to intimidate and takes the form of threats of abandonment or abuse, confinement to the home, surveillance, threats to take away custody of the children, destruction of objects, isolation, verbal aggression and constant humiliation. Economic abuse includes acts such as the denial of funds, refusal to contribute financially, denial of food and basic needs and controlling access to health care, employment, etc. It should be noted that although the categories above are listed separately, they are not mutually exclusive. Indeed, they often go hand in hand. The family is often equated with sanctuary, a place where individual can seek love, shelter, safety and security. But evidence show that it is also a place that imperils and breeds violence against women and children. Violence against women is often a cycle of abuse that manifests itself in various forms throughout their life. Now, I have given a table which explains violence against women in various phases of the life cycle of a woman. Now, the first phase is pre-birth, and the type of violence that they are subjected to is with regard to sex selective abortion, battering during pregnancy on birth outcomes. And during infancy period, it is female infanticide, physical, sexual and psychological abuse. And during the girlhood period, it is the child marriage, female genital mutilation and physical abuse. Sexual and psychological abuse also coincides, incest, child prostitution and pornography. And during adolescence and adulthood, the problems are dating and courtship violence, for example acid throwing and date raping, economically coerced sex, for example the school girls having sex with sugar daddies in return for school fees, incest, sexual abuse in the workplace, rape, sexual harassment, forced prostitution and pornography trafficking in women partner violence, marital rape, dowry abuse and murders, partner homicide, psychological abuse of women with disabilities, forced pregnancy. And the elderly period, they are forced into suicide or homicide of widows for economic reasons, sexual, physical and psychological abuse. Now coming to the various causes of violence, let's see how it functions. There is no single factor to account for violence perpetrated against women and girls. There are several complex and interconnected factors that have made women vulnerable to the violence directed against them. According to Hayes, a research that was done, the following factors are responsible for increasing domestic violence in the present society. They are listed as: the cultural factors include gender-specific socialization, cultural definition of appropriate sex role, then belief in inherent superiority of males, values which give men proprietary right over women and girls, notion of family as a private sphere and under male control, marriage custom which normally is the dowry, then acceptability of violence as a means to resolve conflicts. Now, economic factors constitute women's dependence on men, limited access to cash and credit, discriminatory laws regarding inheritance, property rights, etc., and limited access to education and training for women. Now, the legal factors include limited access to employment in formal and informal sectors, lower legal status of women, laws regarding divorce, child custody, maintenance and inheritance, legal definition of rape and domestic abuse, low legal literacy among women, insensitive treatment of women and girls by police and judiciary. And political factors have the following factors: underrepresentation of women in power, domestic violence is not taken seriously, notion that family is beyond the control of state, risk of challenges by religious laws, lack of organization of women as a political force, lack of participation of women in organized political system. Now the next is consequences of violence. Over the past 2 decades, there has been growing recognition of the multitude of health threats including death, physical injury and mental trauma. This pervasive violence has significant economic, health and social consequences. The economic consequences include the cost of providing health care and other services, increased absenteeism, decreased productivity and lower earnings. Violence undermines women's health and well-being, directly or indirectly, causing chronic morbidity, increased depression, lower birth weight and mortality. Among children, witnessing abuse leads to increased delinquency and gang violence. Violence against women is associated with sexually transmitted infections such as HIV or AIDS. Death from violence against women include honor killings by families for cultural reasons, suicide and maternal death from unsafe abortion. Overall violence contributes to reduced quality of life for families and communities and decreased participation by women in democratic processes. Abuse has been observed to impede the public participation of women, undermine their economic efficiency, cause increased health burden, and impose a drain on scarce national resources. Few studies have attempted to calculate the entire economic cost, including the provision of all services. A study in New Wales in Australia estimated that the overall cost was 1.5 billion Australian dollars a year. World Bank study highlighted the cost of violence in terms of health burden, estimating that rape and domestic violence account for 5% of healthy years of life lost to women of reproductive age in the demographically developing countries. This evidence suggests that economic implications alone are serious enough to warrant special attention to violence as a development priority. In the United States, total loss adds up to $12.6 billion annually, and in Australia, the loss was estimated to be $6.3 billion per year. In addition to this, other social costs like unwanted fertility and contraceptive use, increased rates of HIV and other sexually transmitted infections, increase in infant and child mortality, children's no access to immunization and other health care related public health consequences are also involved with the incidences of domestic violence. Domestic violence affects the productivity level of the victim negatively. Men and women lose interest in household activities. If they are employed, they fail to work with full capabilities in the workplace. Children are found to concentrate less on studies. They drop out of school and do not get the education which otherwise they might have got if they were not tormented, and thus the country loses a productive asset. Therefore, the nation's productivity altogether gets affected because of domestic violence in homes. When old people are tortured and physically abused, they separate themselves from the family members and the daily activities are restricted to themselves. The guardianship they can provide out of their experience, the moral values which they can instill in the grandchildren are not done at all as they are unwanted in their own homes. People need to spend large part of income for medication when they are met with worse forms of domestic violence, which again leads to a loss in productive use of families' income. The cumulative effect of the domestic violence at all levels and across all regions is the country's hindered development and slow economic growth. Now coming to prevalence of violence at global and national level. Internationally, 1 in 3 women have been beaten, coerced into sex or abused in their lifetime by a member of her own family. Available studies indicate that between 20 and 50% of women in various populations around the world have experienced violence at some point in their life. Worldwide, 2 million girls between the age group of 5 to 15 are introduced into commercial sex market each year. At least 60 million girls who would otherwise be expected to be alive are missing in Asia as a result of sex-selective abortion, infanticide, or neglect. A study by WHO relates that domestic violence against women, based on interviews with 24,000 women between the ages of 15 and 49 in 10 countries which I have listed, like Bangladesh, Brazil, Ethiopia, Japan, Peru, Namibia, Samoa, Serbia and Montenegro, Thailand and the United Republic of Tanzania. These countries, the study was done, they found that between 1 and 21% of those interviewed reported experiencing child sexual abuse under the age of 15 years. Physical abuse by a partner at some point in life up to 49 years of age was reported by 13 to 61% of interviewees across all study sites. Sexual violence by a partner at some point in life up to 49 years of age was reported by 6 to 59% of interviewees, and sexual violence by a non-partner any time after 15 and up to 49 years of age was reported by 0.3 to 11.5% of interviewees. Not only is the violence against women widespread, deeply entrenched and silently borne, women in India experience violence in various forms throughout their lives, and it cuts across boundaries of caste, class, religion and region. According to the National Family Health Survey, 21% of ever married women in India have been physically mistreated by their husband, in-laws or other members of the household since the age of 15 years. Almost 1 in 5 married women have experienced domestic violence. 1 in 9 women reported being beaten in the last 12 months of the survey. About 12% of women reported having experienced violence since the age of 15 years, and 19% reported having been beaten physically by their husbands. In India, more than 6,000 women are killed each year because their in-laws consider their dowry inadequate. Only small percentage of the perpetrators are brought to justice. In another study of 4,000 women reporting physical violence, 63% reported the experience more than 3 times. Tamil Nadu shows the highest prevalence with 41% of the women reporting domestic violence since the age of 15 years. Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Orissa, Bihar, Jammu and Kashmir have prevalence rates higher than 20%. Himachal Pradesh shows the lowest prevalence of 5.8%, followed by Kerala, which is 10.1%, and Gujarat with 10.2%. Now coming to protection against violence. Elimination of all kinds of violence against women requires channelizing simultaneously the attention and efforts of all concerned people and work together. This sensitive issue needs intervention and action at multiple levels, that is state, society and individuals in public and private capacities. At the government level, what can be done? To arrest continuously deteriorating law and order situation. There should be vigilant policing round the clock both in cities and suburban areas, and more women police officers in all police stations. Speedy and time-bound justice is needed urgently. Delayed justice emboldens the spirits of criminal-minded elements in the society who take advantage of the loopholes in law which enables them to escape. Reforming the structure and systems of governmental institutions engaged in the law-making and enforcement tasks, which are highly desirable, but it may take a longer time. Now, non-governmental institutions or non-governmental organizations, they can conduct series of seminars, workshops, meetings at different places on various aspects of violence or oppression against women. They should discuss in depth the gravity, the enormity and dangers of continuously deteriorating law and order position, deteriorating human values, self-centered attitude of individuals, and alarming rise in bestial acts against women, which makes it very unsafe for women to move freely outside their homes. Now, media also plays a very dominant role. Media should bring women issues to public domain in a very forceful manner. They can play an important role in spreading awareness. They can also provide a platform to speakers and panelists from different fields, eminent personalities responsible for decision making, to share their views and conduct an in-depth study on various gender issues and view it holistically, touching various aspects of the problem. At family level, training for gender sensitization should be imparted within the family. Right from the beginning, all the children should be treated equally without any gender bias. On women's part, women should raise their voice against injustice, create awareness amongst women about their rights, and channelize their efforts by writing articles, organizing seminars and workshops. Irrespective of their social status in society, they should join hands and work in a spirit of unity. They should raise their voice boldly against social evils like dowry, bride burning, female infanticide, etc. Women should exercise utmost vigilance both at the mental and physical level to ensure their safety and security so that no one could exploit them when placed under adverse circumstances in life. They must always be prepared for self-defense by getting training in karate or such other games or whatever it be. Now, social workers should provide merit services to victims and perpetrators of domestic violence, which include counseling and support through shelter programs across the country, individual counseling through private practice settings, court advocacy through country victims service agencies, and social justice community organizing efforts to prevent domestic violence from occurring in the first place. Some of the recommendations that we would like to give: comprehensive and extensive premarital counseling should be given to intending couples on how to manage their marital relationship. There should be public enlightenment through the mass media on the negative effects of domestic violence against women, especially wife battering. Religious leaders too should vigorously teach against marital violence in their place of worship. Youth should be encouraged and taught to distrust and not to imitate brutish treatment of wives around them. Medical professionals, after physical treatment, should refer the victim to counselors and psychotherapists. Punishment given to grievously offending husbands should be publicized so that it can serve as a deterrent to others. To summarize the whole thing, now we have looked at a very sensitive topic, which is violence against women, and this is rampant in spite of all the development that has taken place in India and also outside the world. Now, this issue has to be looked not only by an individual or by the household or by the society or by the government, but it has to be holistic. Everybody should form part and parcel of this serious issue that is taking place everywhere. Now, we as a whole should unite together, join together, pool all the resources, and then if we work towards eliminating this completely, it can be completely uprooted from the society, and we can have a very peaceful houses, or the family life would be better when the women are lifted up, and this would be a very peaceful, and India would be a very peaceful country where we can live peacefully. Thank you.